What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, mailbag. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your question taken on the show. Your question answered on the show. I'll take it. Mailbag question. Love the pod. Everyday listener. Like you, I'm an 80s and 90s kid. Grew up loving rap and grunge rock, and now in country as well. Zach Bryan is the greatest thing I've ever heard. I saw Zach Bryan live Super Bowl weekend when I was in Vegas. He put on an incredible show. He is, as one of my buddies that works for like 49ers Enterprises, I guess. I don't want to give him away, but he works under the 49ers umbrella. Had texted me how I got tickets. I'm like, one, I paid way too much. It's the most money I've ever spent on tickets by a mile because Game Time didn't have them. It was only through this one thing. And I got them. And I was like, well, we're in Vegas. I've already lost probably $5-7 grand at the tables. Let's go do something fun. And he is way better live than he is if you just listen to his, album music. It was a great show. The commentary on bands existing anymore, I thought profound, and not to go racial, but there's barely white American males in music anymore that aren't rappers. I haven't thought about that. Machine Gun Kelly? Yeah, I just don't think bands really exist at the same level they did when I was a kid. Like if you wanted to go in music, if that was a goal of yours, you would like start a band. People at my high school started a band. I just don't think people would start a band. I miss that. We just don't have bands. That's why all this like Nickelback and Creed on Instagram, while it's somewhat sarcasm, it's also just like people my age, just bands used to exist. I just don't feel like they do. I know they technically still do, but I think it was at Coachella, Sublime, who has one of the great all-time albums of my life, at least my personal favorite, the self-titled album. Bradley, the lead singer, like a lot of those guys, died on drug overdose. His son is now the lead singer and did a pretty good job singing the songs. Pretty talented kid. Not an easy guy to replace. I love Jared Goff and believe he can get us our first ring. However, 53 feels a very rich. 45 more about right. But I digress. My question, do you think the Lions are making the same mistake the Cowboys are by paying a few players record-breaking deals? They've now paid Panay, Amon-Ra, and Goff $111 million for the next 4 years. 3 players are now nearly 45% of their cap. Well, the cap doesn't work that way. I mean, part of the way these contracts operate is if I give you $100 million, the first couple of years of your cap hit is usually low. Like Deshaun Watson's cap hit last year was $20 million. This year it goes up. Think about Dak Prescott. Last year of his deal, his cap hits have been smaller. So you fudge the books in the way that you write these contracts. I think like the Cowboys, this is I think the one, I don't know the solution, and you're never going to get a player not counting on your cap. I know people have talked about like, if you draft the quarterback, he should only count 50%. We've heard all the ideas. One draftable player doesn't count against your cap. That doesn't seem like it's ever had traction in the league. Fun for us to talk about it, fans to talk about it, but it's never felt even close. But if you draft well and draft star players, like high-end Pro Bowl impact guys, what are you going to do? Not sign them? Now, the Zeke contract clearly backfired, but the Cowboys had a lot of high-priced guys like Dak Prescott. He's your quarterback. Zach Martin was, an elite player. Tyron Smith for all those years, an elite player. I think when you draft well, you're kind of getting this position. Now, you can't pay the wrong guys right? They paid Jalen Smith, that backfired, paid Zeke, that backfired. But I have a hard time being critical of paying Penei Sewell. High-end player, really good at a premium position. St. Brown, when I was a kid, the Lions offense, Herman Moore, they just would catch so many balls. I'd love playing them on video games. Scott Mitchell, the left-handed quarterback. When you're catching 110 to 120 balls a year, like you're going to get paid a lot of money. And when you're a really good player in a team's offense that drafted you, I just don't see what you're going to do. And we can nitpick over like ultimately 45 and 50. There's no difference there. There really isn't much of a difference there. I think the way these teams look at it, if you really like the player, is in like 3 years, the cap's going to go up another 60, $70 million. And it's not as big of a hit cap wise. Obviously, all the contracts, you'd have to look at all the individual ones, hit differently, different years. But I don't think you ever go wrong paying guys to continue to play at a high level. Ever. You could argue in all sports. You get into a bad position when you pay a guy and his play diminishes. Because ultimately, this is a business and I need an ROI. So I pay you a lot. Patrick Mahomes returns the investment. You give Russell Wilson a ton of money, didn't return on investment. So I think that's the way you got to look at it. If Sewell keeps being a high-end tackle, St. Brown keeps producing, and Goff keeps playing at a Pro Bowl level, you won't have any issues. Where you get issues is when one of those guys takes a step back. And because they're all young, they're all ascending players. Goff isn't, but the other two, I think you have to feel pretty good about your team investing in high-end guys that you're winning with. That's another thing. If you're not winning and you extend guys to a lot of money just because they're your guys, that's where you could have problems. The Lions are winning at a pretty high clip, and you feel like they're going to be pretty good again. I believe if Howie Roseman had the number 1 and number 2 pick in the draft and couldn't trade out, he would have chosen the same 2 players he had at 22 and 40. Can't believe I have to wait 4 months to see the Eagles in action. I'm going to disagree there. I think he would have taken an offensive tackle. If he was stuck at number 1, I think he just would have taken Joe Alt because they value offensive linemen greatly. And Lane's getting up there in age. I think they 100% would have taken, assuming Joe Alt was their number 1 tackle on the board, but they would have gone offensive tackle because there wasn't a defensive lineman in this draft good enough to take there. But I think they would have gone defensive tackle. Now, would they have taken the corner there? They might have because who else? They don't need receivers. They wouldn't have taken a receiver. Obviously, don't need a quarterback. Yeah, I think they might have taken the Toledo corner there, but I believe that they would have taken an offensive lineman. But I hear you. I'd be excited, too, if I were you in terms of the team. We are this close to crowning an NBA champ. And with action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There are only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boost, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until the next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. New to DraftKings? Listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Do you think there are coaches and GMs who say no chance when trying to trade for a player? Example, Pat Mahomes to Washington for 5 first-rounders. Are all GMs looking for a deal, or are there times when they just say, let's kick rocks, because there's no way to replace that caliber of player? Well, I don't even think that phone call would ever exist. Like part of it is if you're a GM, GMs deal with those conversations more. You're not, there's probably, I mean, jokes made on the phone. Like, what would it cost for so and so? And you know they're never going to trade them to you. But like serious conversations, I just don't even think you'd waste your breath with conversations that you know, like, there's no amount of draft picks that you could trade for Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. So he doesn't even come because you know the team is just a hard no. It's just no chance, right? Now, I think let's use a guy that new coach, new administration. I guess the GM's still there. But like the moment Pete gets fired, once the dust settles, are there chances? Hey, would you guys trade DK Metcalf? Like those to me are more realistic than like, hey, could we get Myles Garrett? Would you trade Nick Bosa? Like those are hangups. But I don't even think those conversations really happen or get poo pooed so fast that you don't even get real. So I think there's an element of just common sense with some of this stuff. And then they're like, damn, they asked for that guy. Well, you have to look at the individual situation. I just use DK as an example. I'm not saying anyone did, but I'd be stunned if teams didn't sniff around at the combine with a new coach, right? And I think you kind of do that. And then you get some bigger name guys that are just, yeah, he'd be available. But there are a lot of guys in the NFL, high end players, non quarterback, that clearly are not available. That just, you couldn't get the guy. Now, if you're the Houston Texans and someone goes, hey, Laramie Tunzel, 3 first-round picks, you're like, well, it makes you think, but is anyone offering you that? But because you're like, who's going to play left tackle for us? But how do we turn 3 first-round picks down? I just don't think those conversations happen probably as much as I've never been a part of those conversations, but just knowing the way these GMs operate, it'd just be a waste of your time. And time is so valuable to all these guys. Now, clearly people have shot for the fences. I remember when I was with the Eagles, I wasn't privy to these conversations, but there were rumors going around the office that there was a large offer made to the Washington football team, Commanders, Redskins, for RG3 when they traded up to draft him, I think, or maybe right before, like several first rounders, Deshaun Jackson. But a lot of those things feel pretty untrue. Uh, it's just hard to know. Some crazy trades get offered during the draft, or at least like, hey, would there be any interest? I'm sure Washington got a lot of those this year. And Adam Peters said, I've made it pretty clear early on, like, we're not moving. So if you know he's not moving, it's not like if I just walked up to your house right now, if you live in a $500,000 house, I knocked on the door and I said, hey, I'll offer you 800 grand. And you bought the thing for 300. So you'd make a lot of money. You'd be like, well, interest rates are high. Got to move my shit. It'd be, you could, I like living here. School's close. My job's close. It's not life changing money. But if I knocked on that door and offered you $4 million, you'd be like, you want me to move your stuff in? So there's always numbers and prices, trades in business that you just can't say no to. But I think it's pretty rare those situations even get, I would say, brought up. Because if you do bring it up, are you ready to pull the trigger on that offer? Okay, I'll do it. Teams would trade an ungodly amount for Mahomes, but they would never trade Mahomes. Like they'd all quit before they ever did that. Big fan of the pod. What is the likelihood that Daboll gets fired after this year? As a Giants fan, I think he should get a chance to pick his quarterback because last year he had one of the best coaching seasons I've ever seen with limited talent. Totally agree. He was my coach of the year 2 years ago. I thought winning 9 games with that shit roster, with Daniel Jones throwing 15 touchdowns, was, I mean, an incredible coaching job. But last year wasn't just bad. It was all the other stuff going on internally that I think this year if it gets weird again, like look at the Giants' history. They've kind of become the opposite of the Steelers. Even though when you think about like historic NFL franchises, the Bears, the Packers, the Giants, like these are like, they have long, long runways of being like consistent franchises. Well, they fired Shermer after 2 years. They fired McAdoo after 2 years. They fired Joe Judge after 2 years. I don't know, man. I mean, you got to win. This is a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in a while, that has one of the worst records in the league over the last handful of years. The Daniel Jones situation, I don't know this for sure, but I think it's fair to guess that was pretty owner driven. Though I don't think Daboll wasn't on board with him as the quarterback. Let's just use a hypothetical here. They win 5 games, and the offense is terrible. Well, you get to to a situation where you're like, well, okay, our defense is okay, and we're a competitive team in games, but we lose it all the time, and our offense is bad. Well, this is an offensive coach. So if the offense isn't working, can this guy fix it? Can this guy get us going in the right direction? I do think the situation with the assistant, and I understand Wink has a big ego too, but I don't think the Giants like that crap. So I think there's going to be tangible pressure on them to be not just competitive this year, but to just feel a little less crazy. I mean, they kind of had a Jets vibe during the season and after the season, and they're not the Jets. Like in theory, they have much more stable ownership, but I don't know. If I was a betting man right now, I don't think the Giants are going to be any good. Been wrong before. This is from Browns fan in Cincy. Do you think it's a possibility that the Browns will turn it over to Winston if Deshaun is struggling after a few weeks? I've had some Browns fans in my mentions being like, you told Colin you think they're going to suck. Like, what? Listen, I think Stefanski's a good coach. I think obviously they have talented, high-end guys on their roster. But if your quarterback is not good, you have a major situation on your hands. I think we all agree that the way Watson played, subtract the one half of football, which is easily the best half of football he played in like a 3-year period. It was objectively awful. So my take on the guy, someone's like, you're just biased about the massage. I don't give a shit about the massage stuff. Though, I mean, I judge your decision-making and wouldn't ideally want you as my quarterback. But if you were sweet, like whatever, look past it. He's bad. So he's been bad, then he gets injured, and I'm just supposed to assume he's going to be good this year? I think we've learned in recent memory, like when a guy starts showing you for a while he's not that good, you just kind of got to believe him. So I'm betting on Deshaun Watson not being a good player. And if he's not a good player, I don't care if Myles Garrett has 700 sacks. I think we all agree it's hard to win games when your quarterback play is poor. And Nick Chubb, who at least you could lean on the run game, like had a devastating injury. Devastating. If you told me Chubb was there, I'd be like, even if Deshaun's just average, you could probably get to 10. I don't look at it like that. So I think they're in a weird situation because of how much money they're paying him. I have a hard time seeing them bench him. It would all come down to how much juice Stefanski has. And if he's playing shitty, is the owner cool with it and just kind of eating the money and whatever? But I am assuming that Watson is going to be like the guy we have seen. I mean, last year there were moments where he was playing like a bottom 2 or 3 quarterback in the NFL. You could watch a couple series of them and just be like, what is going on? I don't see it. The player that they paid for and traded for, we are so far removed from that guy. That's the thing. We are so far removed from that player. Years ago, the guy that we saw in Houston in the late 2000 teens, 18, 19, like this version, remember he didn't play a year. Then he was suspended. Then last year he gets injured. Like we have a large body of time between high-end Pro Bowl difference maker guy and the guy we've seen in recent, and a lot less experience on the field. He hasn't been playing. He's been injured. Obviously his cap hit is massive. So Jameis, I don't know if Jameis is the answer, but I would be nervous if I was a Browns fan. Not about most of my team. Good. Nick Chubb injury sucks. That guy's a stud. Question. If you were the Vikings, how would you go about handling JJ McCarthy? When would you look to start him? Darnold, if the Vikings are winning under Darnold, do you risk pulling him? Or is JJ redshirt this year and debuts next season? In a perfect world, if you're the Vikings, and this is a quote-unquote transitional year, you're in the wild card mix, you're hovering around 500, you're 5-5, or you're 4-3, or you're 7-7, and you're just in the wild card hunt, and you never have to play him. And he gets the Patrick Mahomes treatment. He gets the red shirt. I would say that's a 50-50 proposition. Because Darnold, most people think suck. Kyle Shanahan doesn't think he sucks, and Kevin O'Connell doesn't think he sucks. But there's pressure on him. Like, if you're any good with these weapons, assuming they get Justin Jefferson's situation, his contract, they get a deal. You got him, you got Jordan Addison, you got an offensive coach, you got some good offensive linemen. You're off and running. And Darnold could have a solid year. But if it doesn't go well, like most people think he stinks, he's clearly not as good as I thought once upon a time. But I am pretty intrigued to watch him under Kevin O'Connell. But if you're losing, the kid's going to play. It's just the way the NFL works. No one's going to want to watch a bridge quarterback for a team that's 3-6. If you're 3-6 or 4-6, like JJ's going to play, whether he's ready or not. That's just the way football works in the modern day landscape. We've seen it constantly with these guys, that you want to go with the bridge guy, and then it's like your team's not as good, and then boom, that guy comes in. And ideally, you hope it doesn't ruin his confidence, but I'm always a believer the only way you get better is through experience. And most of the time, if that experience early on is rocky, that's actually the best learning tool you can have. I think Jared Goff got that with the Rams. Because his rookie year, it couldn't have gone any worse. It couldn't have gone any worse. Next year, McVay comes, and he looks good. Like, for as shitty as last year was for Bryce Young, the reps he got, the experience he got seeing different defenses, the understanding of the NFL speed, that can only help you. Obviously, then you have to turn that into a positive. But that's only a negative if you hold on to that negative forever. Bad experiences, to me, are the best learning experiences by a country mile. And I say it all the time, like, the only way I know that I learn, and I think for most people, is like through experience. You can write in a notebook, you can have theories, you can have all these ideas, but until you try them out and fail with those and figure out what works, it's the way you improve. So Patrick Mahomes' situation just doesn't happen very often anymore. A guy drafted high, red shirts. But it was easy because they were winning and Alex Smith was having a career year and they won the division. I think we all agree Minnesota's probably not going to win the division. Honestly, there's a decent chance. I would imagine most people, I haven't thought this far, are going to pick them to finish last. Lions, Packers, and the Bears. I mean, those three teams that could all win 10, 12 games. Someone's got to lose. Not everyone can win. Ravens and Bills have got to be sick. This year was supposed to be the rebuilding year for the Chiefs, and they still won the Super Bowl. How can any AFC teams finally beat Mahomes? I said this when the schedule came out because I wrote down the Chiefs schedule. And then as I'm talking, I just realized what? In what world am I breaking down the Chiefs schedule? Lock them in, AFC West champions, and 11-13 wins. We don't even need to debate. They're going to lose some games. They're going to have a weird moment or two. But the evidence now, it's pointless to break that down. You could argue every other team in the league, fair game. That team, no point. Now, if you want to buy tickets or, season ticket holder, I totally get it. But I just mean analyze wins, losses, or hard or not. No, we're not doing that anymore. To me, the Ravens, the Bills, they had so many injuries. Their defenders were gone. They weren't going to win that game. To me, the Ravens got to have a tough taste in their mouth this offseason. Their team was arguably better, man to man, top to bottom, the guys they were rolling out on the field versus the Chiefs. And Lamar, who had played the best football of his life, just a couple weeks removed from kicking the Niners' ass. He was rolling. He was the MVP. They have home field. Defense is elite. The Chiefs did not score a point in the second half, and he played shitty. Him and the offensive coordinator. I don't know who to blame the most. If you want to blame Munkin, don't blame you. I had 5 large on that game, and that sucked. They didn't run Lamar. He got tight. I equate it to like in Tiger Woods' prime, you can be beating him, and then you just kind of get tight as it goes because you're like, I can't make a mistake. And then you get tighter. Part of beating a great player when you're a great player is playing loose like that guy is playing loose, matching his level. And it just kind of unraveled. The offense was off. The scheme. Josh Allen had just run for like 80 yards the previous week. Early on in that game, on like a 4th and short, Lamar busted a 25-yard run. It's like, let him move around. And they kind of keep him in the pocket. He was skipping balls. I don't think the Bills are kicking themselves. I think the Ravens are. Lose their defensive coordinator. Like, that was the Ravens moment. Then you get the Niners. You would just beat the shit out of them. Even the Niners, like, it sucks losing that game. It's like, yeah, Chiefs kind of own you. Love the pod. Buddy of mine got me onto it a couple years ago. What makes your blood boil more? Someone arguing Chip Kelly isn't a fraud, or the tip option at a grab-and-go beer stand at the stadium? Well, the tip thing, I mean, we all know. Tipping's everywhere. You could... we're inundated with it now. So it's just pointless. Everywhere you're going to turn, tip's going to be asked for you to give 47% on a $3 purchase. Here's the thing with Chip Kelly. I don't know the guy personally. And there were moments where obviously he was one of the most innovative and good offensive coaches in all of football. But his treatment of people and his actions speak for themselves. I mean, that podcast those guys put on, when does that ever happen with any coach? And we know players hate certain coaches. That's never happened. Ever. And it'd be one thing, it's like, oh, Deshaun and LaShawn, Shady got traded, Deshaun got cut. Of course, those two guys hate him. Jason Peters didn't. He can't stand him. Brandon Graham's like one of the nominees every year for Man of the Year. High-level guy. Team captain for the Eagles for like a decade. Can't stand him. Jeremy Maclin never had any issues. I think I feel pretty good about my stance. And like I said, I don't even think it was just players. That was their perspective. It was the treatment of people in the front office. It was the scouts. You just saw his actions at UCLA, and the media defends him because some of them know him, Klatt and Coward. I just think he's the ultimate scumbag. I don't know what else to say. Some people are just scumbags, right? And in his mind, maybe he's not. Maybe he's just super selfish, doesn't care. But when you're the head man, the way you treat people, he's awful at it. And I think UCLA, I don't know if Deshaun Foster is going to be any good. Love Deshaun Foster as a player back at UCLA. He was a star. It's not an easy place to win. I mean, it's not some powerhouse football program. But it's just, what a bizarre career. That's what I would say. What a bizarre career. He revolutionizes offense at Oregon, gets the Eagle job, and has a pretty good first year. Easily could have won the playoff game. And then it unravels. Run out of town. I mean, they couldn't get rid of him fast enough. Somehow the 49ers hired him. He had the worst season in 49er history. Worst defense they've ever had. They won 2 games, which ultimately led to Nick Bosa. And then he takes a year off to go to the media, which he the disdain that man has for those guys. I always love, and Jim Moore Jr. did this, guys that hate the media, and then when they get fired, their egos and their narcissism so big they have to get in front of a camera. Listen, you want to get in the media, I got no problem, but like treat them like you don't. You just get fired and you're desperate to kind of keep your name. You don't like that job. And Florida almost hired him. UCLA hired him. And then he left for an offensive coordinator job because Ryan Day is his guy. Now, they might be okay because Harbaugh's gone now. But, man, I just don't think it's that hard to treat people well. And when you're a head coach, when you're, the CEO, a lot of people are looking at you. And your true colors come out. You can treat people well or you don't. I mean, it really gets back to basic, like when you're a kid and your parents teach you to be nice to people. Obviously, it changes when you're asking them to do stuff. I'm not saying everyone, when you're a boss, needs to like you and you have to be nice and hold their hand all the fucking time. I'm just saying on a consistent basis, are you a scumbag or are you not? I think history is pretty strong on my side. No more talking about that guy. Go blue. As a Seahawks fan, I struggle to understand why Geno Smith gets so much hate. He had the NFL record for go-ahead touchdowns last season and is 10th in the league in QBR over the last 2 years behind one of the worst O-lines in the league. You guys have been blaming the O-line for a long time. I think you're too young. I know you had some injuries last year, but your two young tackles are pretty good. In a scheme that refused to allow him to throw into the middle of the field, as evidenced by the public frustration of JSN. I think that's Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. He's been at the Pro Bowl both seasons and was in the top 5 in 22 in completion rate, touchdowns, and passer ratings, and also doesn't have the mileage of your usual 33-year-old quarterback. I'm not saying Geno's necessarily elite or he'll be here for 5 or 10 years, but I think that if the defense has been even middling in the last 2 years, the tune of Geno would be so much different. I think there is a world that if Geno is given time to throw, like he should be able in the new offense, he could surprise some people. You guys, Seattle fans, have blamed the offensive coordinator for a decade. A decade. Blame the offensive coordinator. It's always the offensive coordinator's fault. Listen, I don't think Geno gets that much hate. Everyone gives him his appreciation. Incredible career turnaround. But 2 years ago against the 49ers in the playoff game, this year, I just, if you watch Geno Smith and feel like you can compete at a high level in the playoffs, I don't know what to tell you. You've seen Russell Wilson in his prime was a completely different universe as Geno. And it was hard to win in the playoffs with that. Obviously, your defense has been a problem. One of the reasons Pete was run out of town, because you invested all that in defensive players in the draft and trades, and your defense was putrid. I'm not blaming Geno for that. But I have a hard time. And listen, Geno, he's not like the 25th best quarterback in the league, but he's probably, you give me all the stats you want, there are probably 15 guys, maybe not, at 12 with ease, you're taking over them. I would say 13, 14. Let's just go to the NFC. This year, on the good teams, who is Geno Smith getting picked ahead of? Jared Goff? No. Jalen Hurts? No. Dak Prescott? No. Jordan Love? No. Brock Purdy? No. Teams, Matt Stafford? No chance. Caleb Williams? No. The NFC South, Baker. We could, okay. Baker. That's what we're talking about. Now you have Baker, won a playoff game. Could Geno? I think Baker's team's a lot better. I mean, I would take Tampa's roster over Seattle's. I just have a hard time. You guys just always blame the offensive coordinator. It's always been the offense. Russell Wilson was the only high-level quarterback. If you have a good Pro Bowl quarterback, your assistants always get head coaching jobs. Russell's always got fired. Think about all the good, successful coaches that are offensive guys always come from productive quarterbacks. Everyone trying to hire Ben Johnson. Why? Jared Goff. Everyone wanted Shane Steichen, what he did with Jalen Hurts. McVay's guys with Goff and Stafford. Kyle's guys with Jimmy and Purdy. All Seattle's offensive coordinators got shit canned. They can't all suck. I'm not saying they're Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, but I think we always point the finger when it comes to Seahawks. Like, oh, their offensive coordinator, idiot. Remember, it was like, you can't let Russell cook. They let him cook. Then he burned the cheeseburgers, and the barbecue was on fire, and the oven blew up. So I would say the offensive coordinator was pretty positive when it came to Geno. Because when Geno Smith started playing for Seattle, most people thought he sucked. Then 2 years later, you rattle off some stats, he's a pretty productive player. Is he good enough to win in the playoffs? Is he good enough to get to the playoffs? Maybe I'll be wrong. And it sounds like I love his story. I'm pro Geno, but I'm not pro Geno doing big things. I don't see it.